This week on Who Deserves to be Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we make the case for you to vote for Bad Company and the Black Crowes to be inducted. The nominees for this year's class for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have been announced. The list for this year is as follows: Bad Company, the Black Crowes, Mariah Carey, Chubby Checker, Joe Cocker, Billy Idol with Steve Stevens, Joy Division / New Order, Cyndi Lauper, Maná, Oasis, Outkast, Fish, Soundgarden, and the White Stripes. As they have for the past decade or so, the Hall has a fan vote, which does count towards who gets inducted. Go to vote.rockhall.com to vote. You can vote for up to 7 artists once a day until April 21st. The link to the voting is in the show notes there. That would be the vote.rockhall.com link. This year, we will do what we always do. We'll take a look at the cases for at least 2 nominees per week. This week, we're going to make the case for you to vote for a couple of rock groups who are also first-time nominees: London, England's supergroup Bad Company and Atlanta, Georgia's The Black Crowes. First up, Bad Company. As we always do when we go stat hunting, to the tail of the tape we go. Bad Company released 12 studio albums, 6 live albums, and 7 compilation albums. Of those, 11 hit the top 40 on the American charts, with 5 of those 11 going top 10, including their 1974 self-titled debut album, which went to number 1 and sold 5 million copies, becoming their biggest-selling album. Their 1975 follow-up, Straight Shooter, went to number 3 and sold 3 million copies. Their 1979 album, Desolation Angels, also went to number 3 and sold 2 million copies. And their 1985 compilation album, 10 from 6, didn't hit the top 100, but it still sold over 2 million copies. They also had 2 other albums go platinum in America and 4 others go gold. In the United Kingdom, they had 7 top 40 albums, with 5 of those 7 going top 10, 5 albums going gold, and 1 album going silver. Their highest charting albums in the UK were their aforementioned first 2 albums, which topped out at number 3. Bad Company also released 29 singles. Of those, 18 hit the top 40 on the American charts, with 8 of those 18 going top 10, including 2 going to number 1, 1990's Holy Water and 1992's How About That. Their biggest selling hit and only gold-selling single, 1979's Rock and Roll Fantasy, only went as high as number 13 in America. In the UK, only 3 of their songs went top 40, with none of their songs going top 10. They are yet another example of another British group who were far more popular in America than they were in their own country. They've also been a classic rock radio staple for decades, with songs like Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Feel Like Making Love, Rock and Roll Fantasy, No Smoke Without a Fire, Electric Land, If You Needed Someone, among many others. Bad Company's original lineup of singer Paul Rodgers and drummer Simon Kirke, both of whom used to be in the group Free, along with ex-Mott the Hoople guitarist Mick Ralphs and ex-King Crimson bass player Boz Burrell, were considered a supergroup at the time. They sold 40 million records worldwide, with 20 million of those being sold in America, with a big chunk of those being sold during the 1970s with this particular lineup. This lineup also broke up in 1982 as the band needed a break at that point. It's also worth noting that the 1970s were when the band were being managed by Led Zeppelin manager Peter Grant, who managed both bands until Led Zeppelin drummer John Bonham's death in 1980. And it is said that Peter lost interest in managing after that. During their various versions of the band, there were vocalists Brian Howe and Robert Hart, along with a couple reunions with Paul Rodgers. Overall, Bad Company has had 13 different members over the decades. As far as why they belong in the Hall, they were one of the groups that showed how a supergroup should be, with every member contributing to the group songwriting. Their songs have been covered by numerous artists, and their style of British rock dominated the 1970s. Plus, they put on one hell of a live show. They've been eligible for the Hall since 2000, and there's been a major push in the fan vote for them. In fact, they're actually at number 2 in the fan vote at this point. Will it help them to win the fan vote? No. Phish pretty much has that on lockdown unless something extremely weird happens. However, the fact that they're getting a major push in voting should make the Hall notice them a lot more. Next up, we're going to look at the case for the Black Crowes, who have been eligible for the Hall since 2016. Back to the stats and to the tail of the tape we go again. The Black Crowes released 10 studio albums, 6 live albums, and 3 compilation albums with 2 EPs. Of those, 12 of their albums hit the top 40, with 4 of those 12 albums hitting the top 10. Their 1990 album, Shake Your Moneymaker, went to number 4 and sold 5 million copies. Their 1992 follow-up album, The Southern Harmony and Musical Companion, was their only album to hit number 1 and went double platinum. It was also their last platinum-selling album, although they had 3 other albums that went gold. Their 2008 album, Warpaint, went to number 5, while their 2000 live album, Live at the Greek, went to number 2 on the American indie charts. The Black Crowes also released 35 singles, and of those, 27 hit the top 40 on the various American charts, with 20 of those 27 hitting the top 10, including 6 of those 20 going to number 1. The Black Crowes had hit singles like She Talks to Angels, Remedy, Sting Me, Jealousy, Thorn in My Pride, and Hotel Illness. The Black Crowes helped to revitalize rock music at a time when grunge started to break through and kill off all the hair bands. So, to have a band that combined Southern rock and blues together become big at that point in time was a feat all unto itself. Were they influential? Well, not so much. Have a lot of their songs been covered? Again, not really. However, they were and still are a no-frills, straight-up Southern blues rock band with a bunch of hits. Will that get them in? Maybe. Considering that much like the band's dysfunctional Robinson Brothers, Oasis has had their own dysfunctional Gallagher Brothers, and they're up for induction. That doesn't count, you say? Yeah, you're probably right. What will probably get them in this year is the push to make this year's class an all rock and roll class in order to not incur the wrath of a few people who are running the United States government, who might actually use this year's class as an example of what's wrong with the Hall or society, or who knows, whatever little culture war comes along that people really want to have these days. Personally, I think that regardless of the fact that they haven't really influenced a lot of people, they still deserve to be inducted. They put out great music. Plus, I actually saw them on their Shake the Moneymaker tour, and they were awesome. I just think that the drum seems to be beating louder for other artists this year instead. I could be wrong, but they did get my fan vote. And now it's your turn to vote. Go to vote.rockhall.com to place your vote. You can vote for up to 7 artists every single day until April 21st. The link, in case you couldn't copy that down because you were driving or whatever, is in the show notes. And next week, we will finish up our look at the nominated artists by looking at the 2 artists whose nominations kind of shocked everyone. The Mexican band Maná, and the early rock and roll dance master Chubby Checker. And that is it for who deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also invite you to check out our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over what happened on that date in music history. That podcast drops daily, including weekends, on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. We also have the Music History In-Depth podcast, where we go more in-depth into the events that happened for that week in music history. And that podcast posts every Tuesday on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify.